All right, good evening, everybody. It's 7 o'clock. We will get underway here this evening. Welcome again to our Rules of Golf Education series. Our second in what we want to do is obviously try and help everybody here in the off season as we all look forward to it warming up and all of us getting a chance to get back out on the golf course here sooner than later. My name is Brian Munns, the Director of Communications and Development with Golf Manitoba. With us tonight, Gord Hudson, Rob Bell, and Don McDonald. Those three will be leading our presentation this evening. You'll hear from Gord for the majority of it. The questions are available on screen as the night goes on. So if you have any questions, feel free either to raise your hand or type them into the chat, and Don and Rob will get involved with those, and we'll have some opportunity when the presentation is over at the end to ask more questions or answer your questions that you may have. So feel free. It's important to ask questions. Obviously, not everybody knows the rules as well as these three guys do. So that's what we're here for tonight, is to have some fun and give you a little bit of an update on the golf scenario. We would ask everybody to turn their cameras on. This is obviously interactive, so feel free to turn your cameras on and be a part of the process here with us tonight. So, Gord, we'll let you take it away from there.
All right, so we're going to get started quickly. I thought we were only at an hour, but apparently we got a little bit more than that. But regardless, we're going to go through 7 different rules today. The first on the next slide is we're going to start with rule 3, and Brian's going to switch that over. There we go. And actually, you can go right to the next one, which we're basically talking about our match play and our stroke play. These are the two most common forms of play that you and I are probably going to be part of. We play it as individuals, we play it as partners, and we do it as under gross score or net scores. You're going to hear terminology throughout the presentation today. With match play, when you hear the word opponent, that means match play. If you hear the word competitor, that means stroke play. So keep that in mind as we go throughout. On the next slide, we're going to talk quickly about match play, which is basically you playing against one other person, or if you're playing partners, your team against another team. It's like having 18 mini rounds of golf, hopefully less than 18 if you're playing well, where you're gonna win or lose a hole or tie a hole. Obviously, if you do better than the person you're playing, you're gonna win the hole. You're gonna be up one. You're only playing against one person, so you can keep an eye on that person. You can see what they're doing. You can see if there's any rules issues. There's no other players affected. So therefore, you can do pretty much what you want to do, and you can ignore a breach if you see one. But there are some limits there. For example, you can't agree to waive a rule. You're getting a little ahead, Brian, but can't agree to waive a rule. For example, you can't sit there and say, okay, anything within 3 feet is an automatic gimme. So that would be something that you just can't do. You're there to protect your own rights, so you got to keep an eye on what's going on that match. So on this slide here, we talk about the results of how you continue on with your match. You can win a hole, obviously, by playing the hole in less strokes. I make a 4, you make a 3, you win the hole. You can win a hole by the opponent conceding a hole, or the opponent gets the general penalty, and the general penalty in match play is loss of hole. And for example of that would be, well, they hit a wrong ball. That's an automatic loss of hole. Tying a hole, we also know that as being called having a hole. We don't hear that much anymore, but it is still, the term is still in the rule book. Obviously, that is, or maybe not obviously, it's the same number of strokes. So you both make 4, you have the hole. Move on to the next one. You can agree to have a hole, but only after one of you has made a stroke to start the hole. And this is different than conceding a hole. So to have a hole, somebody has got to have played at least one stroke to start the hole. So you just can't say, let's say you're coming up darkness, or you got a slow group in front of you, and say, hey, let's just skip the next 3 holes. We'll go ahead and we'll just call these last 3, you're having the hole. That you can't do, because you haven't played a stroke to allow yourself to have a ball. Winning a match is when you're up more, you've won more holes than there are holes left to play. So let's say you win the 14th hole to go 5 up. Well, there's only 4 holes left to play, so there's no way you can lose. So you won the match 5-4. Another way to win a match is your opponent concedes. Let's say you're doing the same thing. You're down 4, but about to tee off in the 14th hole. 14th tee is close to the clubhouse. Looks like weather's coming in. You're playing horrible, and you say, "There's no way I'm going to win this thing. I concede." So you turn around, go to the clubhouse, have a beer. You can concede that, or the opponent gets DQ'd, so disqualified. So that could be. There's a number of ways of getting disqualified. In match play, let's say deliberately gives a wrong number of strokes or failing to correct a misunderstanding of the status of the match. That would be a disqualification. Extending a tied match, that you do 1 hole at a time. So if you're all tied after 18, you got to go out and play an additional hole. It's considered the same round, which is a consideration to think about, because if it's the same round, you're playing with the same equipment, so your same clubs. In stroke play, if it's tied after 18 and you go to a playoff, that's considered a new round. So you could say, "I need a different putter," and you could swap out a putter or something like that. But in match play, it's considered the same round, so you can't do that. You would play in the same order unless the committee decides how that extending the match would go. You would play in the same order, and your handicap holes would equate to the same holes they did during the first 18 holes of that match. When is the result final? That the committee is going to decide, and that could be when the scores are recorded or when the scores are reported to a committee. And that makes a significant factor when, or is a significant factor when we look down the road at if there's a dispute or there's some question about a ruling, and when you ask that. We'll talk about that later at Rule 20. You can move next slide, which is about concessions. And concessions is when you concede, you're giving up on that hole or whatever. So it's when can you concede and what can you concede. So you can concede anytime you want. You can concede the stroke, the hole, the match, doesn't matter, and you can concede at any time. Unlike a half, you could concede a hole or a shot before playing a shot. So if you're on the first tee, it's pouring rain, you're a fair weather golfer, there's no way you're going out in there, you can concede the match without ever playing a shot. And the next slide is about applying handicaps. So you can see players should tell each other their handicaps before the match. Should means you don't have to, but you should. Obviously, it's important for both players to know where the strokes are given for handicap purposes. So it's your responsibility to find out what the other person's handicap is, and it's your responsibility to tell them what yours is, being honest and being accurate. If you tell an opponent you're at 12 when you're actually an 11, that would be a DQ. If you tell the opponent you're 11 when you're actually at 12, then you'll be playing to an 11. So obviously accuracy is pretty important. Next slide is about responsibilities of the player and opponent. Your responsibility is to advise the number of strokes that you've taken and any penalty strokes you've taken, or if you're asked, you have to advise the person. It's not appropriate to say to your opponent that it's your responsibility to pay attention. I don't need to tell you. Well, actually, you do need to tell them. You must give them the correct number of strokes. If somebody asks and you don't respond to the request, it's treated as giving the wrong information, which is equivalent to loss of hole, unless you do correct a mistake. Now, it may not always be possible to tell the opponent before taking your next stroke. For example, if you're on opposite sides of the fairway, or you're on the fairway and your opponent's sliced it 2 fairways over, you might not be able to let them know immediately, but you're advised to let them know as soon as practical. You're in the bush, you're trying to play a shot, and you accidentally move your ball in the bush, and then you knock it out. And in that time period, your opponent has played a shot. Clearly, you didn't have enough time to tell them that you moved the ball, cost you a stroke penalty, but you do it when it's appropriate. Both of you should know the status of the match. That's why you ask how many strokes there are. It's obviously important for your strategy. But both players need to ask questions to protect your own rights, and both must answer when asked. I've heard this many times where people say, well, if they're not paying attention, I'm not telling them. Well, you do have to tell them. So we are now going to switch over. You already done it. Stroke play. We all know this one. This is the most common one we play for sure, where we're competing against, your group. Let's say you're playing in a foursome. You're playing against everybody in your group. Maybe on the weekend, you got 3 groups together, so you're playing up against your weekend group, or tournament play or club championship. Regardless, you're playing against the field. So it could be 4, 12, 144. This one's a little different because you can't keep track of everybody. So keeping track of everybody, that's our job as officials. Everyone is treated equally, but everybody must protect the field. You got to protect the field. That's why you look after, you are being honest. You show your penalties. If you see something happen, you must protect the field, so you bring it forward. Obviously, stroke play is when the player completes in the fewest number of strokes. We know that. Scoring. So this is more for tournament play or your club championship. Your marker is responsible for entering and certifying hole scores on the scorecard. So when you get out for that tournament, or you may have experienced it in your club championship or something, you're going to go to that first tee, you're going to exchange scorecards, and your job as a marker is to keep your score and your player's score. You're keeping track of both, and you must enter accurate scores for your player, because ultimately when you come into that tent at the end, you're going to certify that score is, you're writing it down, you're going to sign it that it's accurate, and your player's going to go over it and they're going to sign it that it's accurate. If there's a wrong hole, or pardon me, a wrong score in a hole, it will stand unless the score is lower than the actual score. So I think that we sometimes think that the marker does not play a huge role, but if you post as the marker a wrong score, it can be devastating for your score, because, and it happens. We had it out at, where was that, Granite Hills, where a very senior player has played in 1 million tournaments Canada wide and posted a wrong score, and it was lower than what he actually shot, and ultimately led to a disqualification. The marker has responsibilities too, and this is to be posting an accurate score. If you knowingly put a wrong score in as the marker, that is a disqualification penalty for the marker. So you must clarify what that person got. Rob and I were out in Thunder Bay this past summer at a Golf Canada event, where one of the players, the marker, said, I just put down what he told me, even though I knew he didn't have what he was putting down, or what he said, which ultimately led to disqualification. So he just didn't want to upset anybody. Didn't want to rock the boat. He says, I put down a 5. I know he had a 6. So obviously that's not appropriate. You're supposed to be putting accurate scores. When you get in that scoring tent, you're only responsible for the score for the hole. We often see when you get to the tent, people stop and then they try to total up the scorecard. You just get in the tent. The scorer keeps track of the total score and will apply the handicaps appropriately. Your job is only to put what the score is for the hole. and we'll total it up. I think the next one, failure to hole out. Unlike match play, you got to finish a hole. So in match play, you may not finish the hole, you may concede it, or your opponent may give you the hole. But in stroke play, you got to put the ball in the hole to finish. If you don't hole out, you get upset. You miss. You got a 2-inch putt left, and you get mad, and you hit that ball across the green, or you see guys hit it and knock it in the water. You have failed to hole out, which results in a disqualification. And you think this wouldn't happen in tournament play, but Rob and I experienced at the Monday qualifier for the PGA of America's Tour, where a guy didn't hole out on 2 holes, and I think it was 2, and he got DQ'd. And you just got to wonder, like, you're Monday qualifying, and he got upset because of slow play, and that cost him his chance to continue on. Find my spot here. So, stroke play. Thanks, Brian. Lost my spot there. In stroke play, go immediately to the scoring tent. You're going to exchange scorecards with the player. You're going to sign theirs. The player's going to sign their own spot on the card, and then you're going to confirm, and you're matching the scores to the holes, and you count them out. And then who's ever in the scoring tent will ensure that everything is absolutely correct. We're moving to Rule 5. Don, Rob, any comments or anything I missed there?
The only thing, Gord, this year, for the first time, there's going to be a grace period to check your scores. Once they're submitted in the scoring tent, you have 15 minutes to correct an error. So for those of you who are playing in Golf Manitoba competitive events, this is a administrative practice that has been adopted by other golf associations, Golf Canada, USGA, R&A, and Golf Manitoba will have it in place. But that doesn't remove the onus from the player to ensure that you have the correct score, but you will have an opportunity to correct it 15 minutes after you submit it.
That's a great point. And you'll see that when the tent is set up at the tournament, there'll be a tent. There's a rope that wraps around it. Often where the entrance that come into the tent, there would be a white line sprayed on there, or there was in the past. I don't know if you'd still do it now that there's a grace period. But your responsibility was to stay in that tent until everything was correct. And if you stepped out to talk to your buddies and they found a mistake, that was a DQ. So now with this grace period, I think everybody's adopted it, as Don suggested. So I think it's a great idea. So,
Hey, Gord.
Yeah.
Just one other thing as well, just to remind everybody, obviously we do online scoring at all of our events. The online scoring on the leaderboard is unofficial because obviously sometimes there's parents or there's caddies that are putting that scoring in to obviously help us run the event and keep everybody as close as it could be. We had an incident last year where there was one error. So just a reminder to everybody that the online scoring is unofficial, but is a huge help to us and our corporate partners and everybody during the events.
Yeah, and I think just building on that, the integrity of the player being responsible for the hole by hole score is really critical to this and what we do. But even if you go into a scorer's tent and the scorer adds up your score to a score that you think you shot, but they may have made human error and the hole by hole is not correct, the onus is on the player to assure that the hole by hole is correct. So we can correct a volunteer maybe adding things up, but it's the hole by hole that goes into the Golf Genius to record your score. That's really critical there. So really take that time in the scorer's table to make sure the hole by hole is right. Don't get so fixated on what somebody's telling you the total adds up to. Just really dial it in, because there's been instances every year where somebody doesn't have a correct hole score, and that often results in disqualification if typically it's lower than it's supposed to be. So
All right. I see there's a question there. So is the paper trail always the official score? And I would certainly say that's the one we're going to draw on for sure. And then if at some point it gets entered incorrectly to the computer, we've got time to fix that. And as Brian and Rob say, it's imperative that we get it right. So we'll always revert back to that card as the first step. Okay, so on rule 5, we talk about practice. We talk about when we start and when we end. Delays such as rain or darkness, and when we resume play. And we talk about pace of play. So here we're talking about practicing on the course before or after a round. Simple way, match play, you can practice on the course before a round. Stroke play, you can't. Really, like that, you always wonder, well, why is that? Well, match play, I mean, you're playing against one other person. So is it possible for the two of those people, or if you're playing in a group, to get out there and play ahead of time? Yeah, it's possible. With a field of 144, is it possible for them all to get out there and practice on the golf course? No, it's not, and it's not practical to even think about doing it. So match play, it is permitted. Stroke play, you could play on the course after your competition round. You could play afterwards. Golf Manitoba, on our hard, I think it's on our hard card, where you wouldn't be playing between rounds on the competition course. I hesitate whether it's on the hard card or it's on our nose to competitor. I really don't remember. But what is practice for, let's say, stroke play? On a day of a competition, you must not practice. And practice means playing a ball or testing the green surface. And that could mean rolling a ball on a green or rubbing the surface. That is considered practice. So the player cannot do that. Ironically, the caddy could, but the key is the player cannot practice on that golf course. Could, as the last bullet there says, the player can practice on the course after completing play for that day. Again, not in a Golf Manitoba event. So what does that mean during the round? Again, during a Golf Manitoba event, you cannot, stroke play event, you cannot practice between holes. But when you're normally playing, you can. I mean, there's the belief that you can't practice in stroke play, but you can in match play. But the reality is you can practice in both, unless there's a condition of the tournament that says you can't, which in Golf Manitoba events, Golf Canada events, you cannot practice between. So that means if there's no practice strokes while playing the hole, and there's a difference between stroke and swing. We know that a swing is just a practice swing, but a stroke is when you make the forward movement of the club with the intent to strike the ball. So you can swing all you want. You just can't take a stroke at it. You can practice chipping or putting on or near the putting green, but you can't go and hit a shot for your bunker. You couldn't run back and go, I need that pitch shot again from 30 yards. No, that would not be considered appropriate. And obviously you cannot delay play to do that. So if you're playing your casual round or whatever and you miss that 3-footer, sure, you can hit it again, but not if you're starting to delay play. Anyway, keep in mind that read your notice to competitor, your hard card. Your hard card, I keep saying that, you may not be familiar what that is, but it's card stock. It's a firmer, it's not your scorecard. It's a separate card that we have on the first tee, which outlines specific rules for Golf Manitoba events. It's essentially identical to what Golf Canada has. The PGA Tour Americas has one, PGA Tour, everybody's got them. So I would strongly suggest that your first event of the year is to pick up this year's one and read the thing. Don't just stuff it in your bag. So, which everybody seems to do. Okay, when to start the round. So the players must start at and not before his or her starting time. I think this, it just seems so reasonable, but surprisingly, it happens all the time when someone is late. You must be ready to play at the starting time. So what does at the time mean? So if your tee time's 9 o'clock, that means at 9 o'clock. It does not mean showing up just before the clock turns to 9:01. And you must be ready. And what do we mean by ready? That means you have to have at least one ball and you got to have at least one club in hand. So if you're late and you're running to the tee and the only thing you can grab is a ball and a putter, well, get to that first tee. But you got to be ready to play. If you're there at 9 and then you think, well, hey, maybe I can still run back to the trunk of the car and grab the rest of my clubs, and you don't delay play, you'll be fine. But if you delay play, well, then you're going to be penalized for that. If you're early, let's say you show up at 8:57 and then you go, hey, I'm here, and then you got to run back to your car to get your shoes and you get back at 9:01, you're late. The 8:57 arriving early doesn't count. You still have to be there for your 9 o'clock tee time. You must not start, you start at and not before. If you're late for your tee time, but you arrive within 5 minutes, you would just get a 2-stroke penalty or a loss of hole penalty in match play. If you arrive after 5 minutes, that's an automatic disqualification. And there's no flexibility there. It happened to us, Rob and I, at the junior last year, unfortunately. But the only time after that 5 minutes would be under some exceptional circumstance that the committee would look at. The rules do outline what is considered an exceptional circumstance, and it does not mean something that's unfortunate or unexpected. It's the player's responsibility to be on time and to allow enough time for delays such as you getting lost or your car breaks down or heavy traffic or you got stuck behind an accident or you got stuck behind a train. Those are not considered exceptional circumstances. The rules do say, they give a couple of examples that if you're at an accident scene where you're providing medical assistance, okay, that's exceptional. The other example they give is a fire alarm gets pulled in your apartment's evacuated, couldn't grab your clubs, so you got a delay. That would be considered exceptional circumstances. In my 20 plus some years, I think we've given an exceptional circumstance once for being late. Key is just don't be late. I did the penalties. So the next one, prompt pace of play. I mean, we've heard this a million times about playing prompt pace of play. The key is to be play ready golf. You be ready. The fourth bullet there, recommend playing stroke in no more than 40 seconds. We will do that at Golf Manitoba. We have guidelines that the rules of golf suggest or recommend 40 seconds, but Golf Manitoba, we employ that. So you need to play ready golf. You need to be prepared for your shot at the time. Don't wait till it's your turn to start getting ready to put your glove on, to start doing yardages. You got to keep doing that. In your casual rounds or whatever, if you're not keeping up to the group in front of you, then you're out of position and you should be letting faster groups play through. It has nothing to do what's happening behind you. It has everything to do what's happening in front of you. If you can't see that group in front of you, or they're off the green on a par 4 or par 5, you are out of position. And you need to let someone play through, or you got to pick up the pace. You can play out of turn. Typically, I mean, we all understand the furthest person away from the hole plays first, but you can play out of turn. Stroke play for sure. Match play, you do it with permission. So in stroke play, you can see your buddy's got some trouble there. He's further away, but he's got to take relief from a cart path. You can certainly yell over, I'm ready, I'll play. Or even in match play, if that's happening, you could say to your opponent, hey, I'm ready. Do you mind if I play? Because playing out of turn in match play obviously is a significant factor, but you can do it. All you got to do is ask the question. Okay, we'll move on to Rule 6. Before I start 6, Don, Rob, did I miss anything there?
No, I think you got it. got everything.
Hey, that's good. It gives me a chance to have a sip of water. Um, so rule 6 is all about playing the hole. This is where we're talking about teeing off, using the same ball from tee to hole, order of play in stroke play and match play. You saw all the golf balls in the previous slide there with their logos on there. And in the next slide here, the next first line is always mark your ball. So every golf bag should have a Sharpie in it, and you need to mark your golf ball so you can distinguish it from someone else's golf ball, and you should be able to distinguish the golf ball you're playing from, let's say you have to hit a provisional, from the first ball to the second. If you're on that first tee, you should identify to the people you're playing against, your opponent or your competitors. I'm playing a Titleist 1 with a blue dot or whatever. You let your players on the tee know, so you identify it. If you're you lose your ball and you got to put another ball into play, you tell your opponent or your competitors again, now I'm playing a top flight, or whatever. The key here is to mark your golf ball so you can identify it. If you're standing on that first tee and you're running, you grab a brand new sleeve of Pro V's out of your bag, you don't mark them, you haven't had any time to warm up, and you just rip 3 into the bush in exactly the same spot, and you go up there, you find all 3, but there's no markings on them. So now ultimately you find them all, they're all yours, but you pick one and it's your third. And now you're hitting your 6th shot because you didn't take the time to put a mark on your ball. It's just so simple. Just always have that Sharpie, always mark your ball. Anytime you play a wrong ball, you must correct the mistake. You don't have a choice here. You must correct the mistake. The only time you wouldn't, I shouldn't say all of them, because there is an exception if a ball's moving in water, but that doesn't happen often. In match play, if you hit a wrong ball, it's a loss of hole penalty, and you move on to the next hole. Stroke play, it's 2-stroke penalty. You got to go back and find the original ball, or if time permits, if you haven't done your 3-minute search, or you go back and under stroke and distance and you play another ball. It's lost. So any strokes with that wrong ball, they don't count. If you don't correct the mistake and you continue playing with the wrong ball, or if you don't correct the mistake at all, it's a DQ. So if you're playing with your buddies on the weekend or whatever, you'd be X and you'd be out of the money game. Looking at rule number 9 now, unless Rob or Don has got anything.
I guess the only thing I would add is every year we have a situation where a player has played a wrong ball, player very experienced, and it's surprising, but it is so common. So I would just encourage all players playing in competitions to mark their golf ball, because it's very easy to mistake a ball. Don't assume if somebody says, "Oh, that's your ball." Still check it to make sure that it actually is, because it has significant consequences to you. So that's an unforced error, to use a tennis expression, if you hit a wrong ball.
I know personally, I play Titleist and I color the Titleist logo, and I go through Sharpies like crazy because all the coloring, but I know I've done once in the last 10 years hit a wrong ball because that logo stands out forever for me and I can see it. And the other nice part is when guys find a ball with that coloring on it, they often return them to me. So, which is kind of nice. So on rule 9, we're going to talk about playing the ball from where it is. We know when we play the ball as it lies. There's no foot wedges. There's no fescue fairies. You play it as it lies. So you always play the ball where it is, unless the rules allow you or require you to move it to another spot. Allow or require. So if you're in ground under repair, that's the allow part, or the required. Let's say you hit it into a restricted area. You got some gardens that it's an automatic, a no play zone, so you got to move it. So that's your required. So a player, you allow or require a player to play a ball from another place or to lift the ball and replace it on its original spot. Otherwise, you're playing it as it lies on the golf course. The next slide is about if the player's ball moves during the backswing or stroke and the player makes the stroke, the ball is not replaced no matter what caused it to move. So if you're starting your stroke and that ball rolls, the wind blew it a little bit, and you continue down with your stroke, then that's tough break. You just play that ball from where it ends up. You don't get to replace it. It doesn't matter what caused it to move. If you start your swing, wind blows it, boom, you play it from where it lies. 9.2, deciding whether the ball moves. Now, it's kind of I call it like a two-step process here. The step one is we have to determine whether the ball moved. And sometimes you go, oh, I think it moved, and I'm not quite sure if it did. You call your opponent over or your competitor and you say, I don't know, I think it might have. So first step is you got to determine whether it did move, and that means you're known or virtually certain. If it's not known or virtually certain, you play the ball as it lies. It didn't move. Known or virtually certain is 95% sure it did. This is not a case of, well, I think it did. You got to be pretty positive. 95% is 19 out of 20 times you think it moved. If you don't have known or virtually certain, or KVC as we call it, then it didn't move. So you play it as it lies. But if you know it moved, you're convinced it moved, you have the KVC, then you got to determine what caused it to move. And this is step two. So step one, did it move? Yes, no. If it's a yes, then we go to step two, and we have to determine there's 4 possible causes, which are natural causes. That's the wind or rain, water. That's number 1. 2 is the player. 3 is the opponent, which includes their caddies. And 4 is an outside influence. And you'll see number 3 is the opponent, which relates to match play only because of that term. And 4, outside influence, which includes any other player in stroke play. So that's where the player is in stroke play. And an outside influence, as it says, is any player in stroke play. An outside influence is any animal, it's any natural or artificial object, like a golf ball, a bag, a cart. It's not a natural force. It could be air from a mechanical fan or a water sprinkler or an irrigation system. I don't know if you've played Glen Abbey, down the 11th hole, there's a par 4 that drops on, and on the green, they've got these fans that blow to keep the air moving. So that would be considered an outside influence. So now that we know that the ball has moved, we got to determine what caused it to move. So we look at everybody standing around, they're going, well, I didn't move it. Did you move it? No. And then there's nothing else around. So if it wasn't the player, wasn't the opponent, wasn't an outside influence, well, then it has to be a natural force. And that's essentially how you did it. Did the player move it? No. Did the opponent move it? No. Or their caddies. Did some other outside influence move it? No. Well, then it's natural forces. And then if it's natural forces, then it's considered, after considering all the reasonable evidence, you're absolutely certain it moved, then it is natural forces. And next slide, there's no penalty. You play it from a new spot. And there's only one exception. Well, actually, there's 2 exceptions, but one exception is if your ball's on the putting green, that if your ball was on the putting green and you had marked it, lifted it, put it back down, then that ball owns that spot and it has to go back. So the only time you would ever move that ball back, being moved by natural forces, is if it had been marked, lifted, put back. There's no penalty for that. You just put it back from the spot and you put away. Now, the only difference would be if your ball's on the green and you've knocked it up there, and let's say you're approaching the green, you have not marked it, and the wind blows it and blows it off the green into a bunker. Well, now you're playing from the bunker because you did not have an opportunity at that point to mark it, lift it, and put it back. The other exception, it's not on that slide, but the other exception is now after dropping or replacing a ball, if that ball moves by natural forces from one area of the course to another, for example, it's in the general area and the wind blows it into a penalty area, it's gone from one area of the golf course to another area of the golf course, and that ball must be replaced back in the general area. And that comes from, if you think of, that was the 2019 Waste Management. Ricky Fowler took relief from that water, the penalty area in the right side of the 11th hole, and he dropped from the penalty area. He goes up to the green to have a look. When he comes back, the ball rolled back in the water. And unfortunately, that rule didn't exist then, but it does now. So if it changes from one area of the course to another, then it gets put back. Okay, I saw that question come up while I catch my spell. Okay, ball lifted or moved by the player. So if the player moves it, that was number 2 on our list of those 4 on that list, or deliberately touches the ball. So they move it accidentally or they deliberately touch the ball. So they do it without reason. That's a 1-stroke penalty, and the ball must be replaced. If you don't move it back and you play it, then it would be a 2-stroke penalty. So contrary to popular belief, accidental movement of a ball is not free unless you're on a green. The only other time it would be free or no penalty is if you're on the tee and your ball's on a tee, and if you knock it off accidentally, the ball's not yet in place, so there's no penalty. But actually, I think that's our next slide, is talking about 5 exceptions to that. So what exceptions are when the player is okay to touch your ball? The first one is you're allowed to lift or move the ball. For example, relief from a sprinkler head. You accidentally move the ball before it's found. So during a search, you're trouncing through tall grass or through the bushes and you step on your ball. So you've moved it, but during a search, there's no penalty and you just have to put it back. If you accidentally move it on the putting green, we just talked about that. There is no penalty for that. You put it back as long as it's been marked first, picked up, put back. And then number 4, accidentally anywhere when applying a rule. So if that would be like when you go to mark your ball and you accidentally knock your ball, that's okay. Moving a movable obstruction, for example, your ball's leaning up against a rake in a bunker and you go to move the rake and the ball moves, no penalty. That's an exception. Restoring a condition when permitted. If you have to restore a condition in a bunker, and you move your ball in that particular, let's say you got 2 golf balls right beside each other and are close to each other, your competitor plays and they splash sand all over your ball in their action. You're entitled to the lie you had before they played their shot. So now you go to recreate it and you accidentally move your ball. That would be not a penalty. If you're taking relief under a rule, or you're measuring under a rule, if you're doing a club length and you knock your ball, there would not be a penalty for that. And then the last one, after coming to rest against the player or equipment. So you hit a ball in a bunker and it hits the lip and comes back and hits you. And now it's resting against you. There's no penalty for that. There used to be the old TC Chan we talked about penalty. That's no longer a penalty if you hit yourself. So that would be the other exception. Next one is about moved by the opponent. So obviously, as soon as we say the opponent, that means we're dealing with match play. If the opponent lifts or moves a ball, obviously the ball has to be replaced, and the opponent would get one penalty stroke. We don't see a lot of this, but again, you would go back to the known or virtually certain, where know it happened, or we are known or virtually certain, 95% sure. And then we go down that list. Did the player do it? No. Did the opponent do it? Yep. In this case, it did. And you put it back, and they add a penalty stroke. There would be exceptions to this. Obviously, if the opponent is conceding a stroke, or they knock it back to their opponent. Let's say they're conceding a stroke or a hole, or they give up on their match and they knock the player's ball back, they wouldn't get that penalty stroke. Obviously, if they lost the match, who cares? But next slide is there again, in this one, there are exceptions as well. The exception would be is the opponent's allowed to lift or move the ball. And allowed would be at the player's request. Let's say your ball is on the green and it's in their way and they want to play, and you're off to the side or something. Yeah, by all means, go ahead and move the ball. If the opponent is on the green, he thinks it's his ball, and he goes and marks it, picks it up. So he's marking it by mistake. That is not a penalty. If they know it's your ball and they mark it, they think that they're doing it as a courtesy. That actually is still a penalty, and would be a one-stroke penalty. But that, I think, is one of those rules in match play that you probably should ignore. I know what happened to me. I'm not sure I'd want to live with that for the rest of my life, penalizing somebody for that one. But that's the nice part about match play, is that it can be ignored. So, and then the last bullet there, same 5 exceptions for the player would apply here too, which is you're allowed under a rule accidentally during a search, accidentally on the green, accidentally anywhere when applying a rule, or it comes to rest against a player or equipment. Ball lifted or moved by outside influence. You get that fox running across. That is an outside influence, that fox, any animal. If they lift or move the ball, you have to move it back. So if they take that ball and from the fairway, drop it on the green, you still got to put it back on that fairway. There is no penalty to any player. Again, you must know or virtually certain that the ball moves. So if you look in the middle of the fairway where you believe your ball was, and you see a fox running, but you don't see anything in its mouth, or you don't see it pick it up, but your ball's not there, you might be guessing that occurred, but you have to be 95% certain. So that's a tough one. I know I play at Southwood, and we had all these seagulls for about a month certainly on our 3rd and 4th fairways, and you get up in the middle of the fairway where your ball should be and it's not there. And you know darn well one of those seagulls took it, but there's no way you could be 95% certain. So it's a lost ball and you're going back. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
You hit it in the fescue.
No fescue in the middle of the fairway. Next slide is about the ball marker. So really, you treat the ball marker the same way as you do a ball. So if you get a penalty for moving a ball and you do the same with a marker, well, you're getting the penalty for that. And then same thing, there's no penalty for accidentally moving a marker, where there's no penalty for accidentally moving the ball. So, and the same exceptions would apply. So just treat the ball marker like you would a golf ball and you're good. Now we're at 14, and while I grab water, Don, Rob, anything, comments?
No, that's really good, Gord. The important point, the ball movement on the green versus in the general area or other areas of the course other than the teeing green. There's a misunderstanding that if you cause the ball to move, that you simply replace it. That's only the case on the putting green. So remember that if you cause the ball to move anywhere else other than that practice swing on the tee, you're going to incur a penalty of 1 stroke and you must replace the ball. So if you don't replace the ball, it's a 2 stroke penalty because you're playing from the wrong place. And if you're playing from a wrong place that is a serious breach and you don't correct it, you could be disqualified. So always, if the ball moves, if you're playing in a competition and you're unsure, call for a referee, play 2 balls, if it's stroke play, but you must correct that. It's very important that you play the ball as it lies.
Yeah, I'd echo that, and just the fundamental part of this rule is play the ball as it lies. So if there's no need to touch your ball or no need to, uh, mark it and pick it up, don't do that, because that starts putting you in a situation where you could be penalized, which Gord's going to talk a little bit about that through Rule 14. But if you're in doubt, as Don had said, call us over. If you're in a situation where you're thinking you're entitled to relief, rather than marking it and picking it up and not being in a situation where relief would be applicable at that situation, just leave it there until we're able to get there. And even if we are there and you're looking through your options, leave that ball in place until you're ready to lift it from the course under a rule, because you can't go backwards once you do that.
Yeah, it's what they just gave me the perfect segue into Rule 14 when we're going to talk about procedures when you're using or touching the ball, or when it must be replaced, when you use the same ball, when you can substitute, how we mark, we lift, we clean, replacing it, dropping wrong place. We're going to fire through all those. So the first one is we're going to talk about marking it and when, who, and how we do this. So before lifting the ball, you must mark the position. There's no ifs, ands, or buts on that one. You must mark the position of the ball. If you want to, for example, to identify it, and you're going to mark that position, the rules now say you don't need to notify an opponent or a fellow competitor if you're going to identify your ball. But wow, that's good practice. And like anytime you're gonna put your hand on the ball, I'd be yelling over to my guy I'm playing with and say, look, here's what I'm gonna do. Because if you don't, it just could raise a question. And I know Rob's thinking the same I am. When we were in Thunder Bay, it caused a nightmare, an absolute nightmare for me, because I was the lead official that day or that tournament. And all because there was a misunderstanding of this rule for 2 in the group, but the other one understood it perfectly. So always, before you pick up a golf ball, you must mark it. And that means you can mark it behind, you can mark it beside, you can hold a club next to it. But the perfect thing is you use that small coin or whatever and mark it identical every single time. So don't one time mark it on the side, the other time on the back, or once in the front, and once, be consistent on how you mark your golf ball. Then there's never any question from an opponent or a competitor. You want to be consistent. You want to be known to be the honest person, not the one that needs to be watched. So, and when you mark that ball, you must remove it before you play your shot. I still see people will hit a putt with their marker behind, and that is a 1-stroke penalty if you don't move it. it's a one-stroke penalty. If you don't mark it and you touch your ball, it's a one-stroke penalty. If you don't mark it correctly, and if you leave the marker behind, it's a one-stroke penalty. If you're proceeding under a rule, for example, taking relief from a cart path, you don't have to mark the spot of the ball, but as Rob suggests, just leave the ball sitting there then. It's just, I would never pick up a golf ball until you decide what your actions are going to be. Rob touched on this. It's just, don't touch your ball, because your options may be worse than hitting it from where it lies. And the minute you pick it up and you go, wow, I don't want to take relief. Well, you've already picked it up, which is your one-stroke penalty. So leave it on the ground. Would I mark it doing a cart path relief? Yeah, I do, because it eliminates any doubt about how you're proceeding. So it's harder to question your procedure if things are marked. So who can lift it? The player can lift it, a partner can lift it. In 4-ball, you can authorize someone to lift it. In match play, for example, you can tell your opponent, yeah, by all means, go mark my ball on the green. No problem. A caddy doesn't need to be authorized when marking a ball on a green. But you can't carte blanche say, yeah, you can pick up my ball anytime you want. It's just every single time you tell someone, you got to give them permission to do it. So we're on mark lifting on a. So mark lifting and cleaning a ball on a putting green only. You can always clean your golf ball. There's no question there. But of course, you have to mark it before lifting it up. And then elsewhere in the next slide, the only other time, or anywhere else on the golf course, the ball can be cleaned if you're entitled to pick it up, except under these 4 circumstances. If you have to pick up your ball to see if it's cut or cracked, you cannot clean it. Again, you would mark it first. You tell whoever you're playing with, I think my ball's cut or cracked, I'm going to pick it up. Mark the position, pick it up, have a look at it. If you, like even in that picture that on the slide here, where that mud's on it, you cannot clean that off to see if it's cut or cracked. Same to identify it. You don't clean your ball to identify it. The rules do indicate you can clean it just enough to identify it. So maybe that mud that is covering up. Yep. Somebody have a question? Nope.
I think
Okay.
you're on.
Okay. So you can clean it only enough to ID it. So that's like probably a better rule is not to clean it to ID it, but you can do it a little bit. So when it interferes with play, let's say your ball's on the fringe and somebody's right behind you, wants to chip or putt from off the green, and your ball's on the fringe. In that particular case, you would mark your ball, and you cannot clean your ball. So that's where you'll see in tournaments and whatnot, where they'll pick it up with 2 fingers and they'll put it off to the side. And they put it off to the side, so there's never a question about them cleaning it. Or they'll hold it kind of looking goofy with their fingers with the ball there. That you don't want to pick it up, mark it from the fringe, and stuff it in your pocket, because hey, it could get clean in your pocket. And then there's a question, and now the question comes up, did you clean your ball? And now you're looking at a 1-stroke penalty for doing it. So that's why you place it off to the side of the fringe or whatever. Or if you need to check the condition to see if you get relief, for example, you think your ball might be embedded. So you can mark, lift the ball, check to see if there's some form of the ball's been embedded. And if it is embedded, well, then now you can clean your ball. But if it's not embedded, then you put your ball back. Now, if you have that muddy ball, when you place it back down, you can put that mud in any direction you want, other than on the bottom, to tee it up, unless the mud was on the bottom. If the mud was on the bottom, then you got to put the mud on the bottom, because the position of the ball is vertical as well. So if it was that little tiny bit of mud under it, it's got to be under there again. But if the mud would have been between the ball in the club face for your next shot, you could position that mud in a different direction. Or if, let's say, there's no mud, but you're putting from off the green, and you could use your alignment mark on your ball if you wish. So you can put it back in any direction you want. Okay, where am I here? So replacing the ball on the spot. So replacing means to place it on the ground or on the turf. If you have to replace to the spot, you must use the original ball. For example, an example of this would be that one I just mentioned about you've got the ball on the fringe, it's in the way of your playing competitor, and now you're putting it back. You must use the original ball. There are exceptions to this, which is the original ball cannot be recovered within a few seconds. So that fox that ran across the fairway grabbed your ball and he took off with it. Well, now you can replace that ball. If you find that your ball is cut or cracked, well, you can replace it with a good one. After resumption of play, let's say the horn blows because of inclement weather, the rain is pouring down, and your tee shot, you just pured it 300 right down the middle, but that's the opposite direction of the clubhouse. You say, I'm not going to get that ball. So you just leave it there, run to the clubhouse, you come back after an hour of rain, and your ball has been washed away by water. In that, now you can replace the original ball with another one. Or someone hit your ball by accident. They played a wrong ball and they fired it into the water. They knocked it OB. That can be replaced. So replace means to set it down on the spot, letting it go so it stays. In these situations where you place it on the ground, it must be replaced by the player or any person who lifted or moved it. Now, if you had to lift the ball for a reason, it must be replaced on the exact same spot or the spot that you know of. This spot includes the vertical location relative to the ground as well. I mentioned that about the mud, but think again, I'm at Southwood where we got fescue everywhere. And if you're searching in the tall fescue and you step on it and you can tell, I just knocked that down 6 inches, then it has to be replaced to the vertical level that it was. I mean, to your best of your ability. Obviously, that's not an exact. So if you don't know exactly where it was, then you estimate. Again, when you're replacing, you can position the ball in any orientation that you want. You could use the alignment mark if you wish. Let's say you're doing that same one off the putting green. You're on the fringe. When your ball was there, it was sitting on a leaf. Your competitor asked you to mark it. You mark it. And then 2 minutes later, when it's your turn, you go back and the leaf is blown away. You don't have to go and find that leaf, or you don't have to grab another leaf. You can just put it down. You don't have to recreate that loose impediment underneath there. Now we're going to talk, the next one is about in the sand. So in the sand, let's say we'll use this diagram, for example. So your ball is that one in that picture. It's got the fried egg, and your partner who you're playing, or your opponent or whomever, their ball's right beside it or close to it. They're further away from the hole and they blast their shot, which destroys your lie. So now you don't get a perfect lie. You have to recreate that same fried egg that you have there. If you were, let's say your ball was up in that shadow of the bunker, totally buried, and you literally had to brush the sand away to try and find it. You found it, you recreate the lie, but as the last bullet says there, you still can leave a small part of the ball as visible. So anywhere else except in the sand, you must place the ball in the near spot with the lie most similar, within a club length. let's say you got two balls close to each other out in the fairway. Your partner or the guy you're playing against, you mark yours, he plays his shot destroys your lie. So now you've got this massive divot where you were. Now you must replace it to a spot with a lie that was most similar to what you had. And you must do that within a club length of where your ball had been laying. Obviously not closer to the hole, and it has to be in the same area of the course, which means had it been in a general area, you can't move it into a bunker or a penalty area or something to that effect. Let's say in that shot, your ball was sitting in a divot, and then the guy you're playing with blasts out and just destroys the area around there, and now your divot where you were is now like 2 inches deep. You still need to replace it back to the lie you had. So now you're going to have to find a similar divot within that club length. You don't get a free relief from the lie you had. If you don't know what the lie was, for example, stepping on the ball in the search, then you estimate literally base it on how you felt. Okay, I feel like I kicked that 6 inches or I knocked it down. If the ball doesn't stay on the spot, you must try a second time. Rules indicate that. You can't give up. You must try a second time. If it still won't stay, then you find the nearest spot where the ball will stay. Again, not closer to the hole, same area of the golf course. But in this case, there's no one club restriction length. So it could literally mean you could end up 10 feet away. You got to find a spot where that ball will stay. 14, dropping the ball. If you're doing this under Rule 3 essential requirements, you must drop the ball. You must drop it from knee height, and it must be dropped in the relief area. I think we all know this by now. Standard rule of thumb is drop in, stay in. Player must drop the ball. You got to let it go from your knee height. That's key. Doesn't matter how you do it. It's got to be from knee height. My knee is at 22 inches. I can stand on my head as long as I drop it from 22 inches. It's got to drop straight down. It's got to drop into the relief area. Can't touch any part of my body before it touches the ground. It's okay if it hits the ground and then touches my foot. That's fine. It just can't hit my foot and then the ground. Here's a diagram of what is good and what's not. I think we've probably seen these. Obviously, the ones in green is correct, and the top right one, dropping from shoulder height, is no longer accepted. That would be a wrong drop or incorrect drop, pardon me. So the next one, I think we'll fly through these. The ball must be dropped in the relief area. So you must drop it in the relief area. The line is considered, like on the line is considered in. You can stand inside or outside, but you must drop in and the ball must stay in. So that's the standard line, drop in, stay in. If you drop wrongly, as this one here from the shoulder, if you drop wrong, it's a redrop, and there's no limit to how many times you can drop wrong. Again, the rule of thumb, again, is drop, drop, place. You must drop. If it rolls out, you drop again. It rolls out, then you place it from where it last touched the ground or where you dropped it. When you drop wrong, it doesn't count as one of those drops. So what happens if you drop it wrong on the next slide? You drop it the wrong way, but it ends up in the correct spot and you play it. That's the next slide there. So if you drop it in the wrong way and it ends up in the correct spot and you play it, that's a one-stroke penalty because you dropped it wrong. If you drop it wrong and it goes into a wrong place, so it's outside the relief area, that's the general penalty. So you get 2 strokes or loss of hole. So drop it wrong, but it ends up in the right place, it's 1 stroke. You drop it wrong and it's not in the right place, it's 2 strokes or loss of hole. Same penalty if you place it when you should have dropped it. That is 2 strokes or loss of hole. even if it's in the correct place. Ball must come to rest in the relief area after hitting the ground relief, even if it touches. I've mentioned this one already. Again, just remember, drop in, stay in. Ball rolls out of the relief area, you drop it again. If after the second one, then this is where you see on TV where they point to the ground, and then where they're pointing, and the guy uses his mic, his portable radio with the antenna to point to it, and that's where you put the ball down. So you'll see the game here that you go right to the edge. So it drops, rolls outside the relief area. You drop it again, it rolls outside the relief area. Now you get the benefit of placing it. And so it's a little gamesmanship on that one. But regardless, it's always drop, place. You must drop a second time, third time, you place it. So if you drop the ball correctly and it's outside, the ball must be placed in the spot where the ball dropped in the second time. Doesn't stay, you place it again. If it still does not stay on the spot, you place it at the near spot where it will stay at rest. Now, there's no one club restriction on this, and that spot where it might end up staying can be outside of the relief area. So even though you've got your relief area and it won't stay, and you just keep trying, if you're outside the relief area, then so be it. When is a ball back in play? When is a ball out of play? When you lift the ball, when the ball is lost, the ball's out of play or out of bounds, sorry. The ball is no longer in play. A ball that's not in play is a wrong ball. It becomes back in play when you do play the original ball, or you play another ball from the tee, or the original ball is replaced, dropped, or placed with the intent for it to be in play. So if you accidentally fumble a ball or you drop it while you're cleaning it, it's not in play. It's all about the intent to be put back into play. If you put a ball into play or with the intent for it to be in play, the ball is in play. Even if you do the four following things. So even if you substitute it for the original ball when you're not allowed, even if you replace, drop, or place it in the wrong place, or in a wrong way, or in a way that does not apply, it's still in play. But under Rule 14.5, we call it the get out of jail free card, or the eraser rule. You can correct your mistake before playing that ball. The thing is that if you do it wrong and then hit it, you can't go back and say, hey, I did it wrong, therefore I get a freebie here. No, you have to. Your get out of jail free card only occurs before you play the ball. Okay, we're going to look at Rule 19. Any comments, Rob, Don, before I move on?
No, just we had one question. I didn't see the golf tournament on the weekend, but Oberg, I guess, took relief from a sprinkler head, and within that one club length, there was so it looks like the sprinkler head was in the rough, but within the one club length, he was able to find some fairway in his relief area and was able to drop into shorter grass. So yeah, that's a really good break, and that's good on him knowing the rules and taking advantage of what the rules do provide. So that is no additional penalty, and sometimes you can get a good break dropping into a better lie. Can go the other way too, unfortunately, but that was nice for him to take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. I saw that drop, and it's very fortunate because the golf or the rules don't distinguish with length of grass, so it's except for a green, but that's a different area of the golf course and it's defined like that. But yeah, rough is rough, fairways, it's all general areas. So bonus for him. Okay, we're gonna look on unplayable ball, rule 19. Anything you can be considered unplayable, that's the player's choice. So you can have a perfect lie in the middle of the fair. If he says it's unplayable, it's unplayable. That's his choice. The only spot you can't take an unplayable is in a penalty area. And you have three options for taking an unplayable. We'll go to the next slide, which is your stroke and distance. You always have the option of taking a stroke and distance penalty, which means just going back to where your last shot was. You play the original ball, or you can change the ball, but you play your shot from the previous stroke or from the previous spot. Your second option is back on the line relief, which is basically an imaginary line which goes from the flag or the pin to where your ball's situated and go back as far as you want. Find a spot you like, and then you get a 1 club length circle from that position, and that's where your ball must land and stay in. Now you must drop that ball on the line, and where it first touches the line, your imaginary line, it creates that 1 club length relief area. And then in that situation, we'll look at a diagram here in a minute, it'll become very clear. The last one is ladder relief, which we know as being the reference point would be where the original ball is situated, which is unplayable, and you get 2 club lengths relief in any area of the course at that point. So we'll look at the diagram here, and we look at number 1, which is the stroke and distance. So that person has hit from number 1 and fired it into the bush at number 3 there onto the right, and they find that their ball is unplayable. So their options are go back, number 1 for stroke and distance. The reference point is where they last hit from. They had a club length half circle and drop in, stay in that circle. Second option is the number 2 with the beige brown circle, using the flag where the ball had been situated and take an imaginary line going straight back. And number 2, where the dot is there, that is your reference point. You drop on the reference point and your ball can roll a club length in any direction, even closer to the hole. It used to be a half circle, now it's a full circle, so it can even roll towards the hole. It's not near the hole than the original ball because you've gone back on the line. And then finally, the third spot is your ladder relief. So where your ball is situated, and then you get 2 club lengths in either direction, not close to the hole. If your ball's stuck up in a tree, then your reference point is directly below where the ball was up in the tree. You may not have to find that first ball, or if it's stuck up in the tree, you have to identify it, but you may not have to retrieve it. Same with an unplayable. I mean, you don't have to find a ball to call it unplayable. It limits you to only one option, which is stroke and distance. For example, you hit one of your brand new Pro Vs into the trees, and you know that it's likely you could find that ball in the trees, but you know it's unplayable. It's absolute jail in there. So what do you normally do? You might hit a provisional, but you want to go look for that brand new Pro V. So you say, okay, I'm hitting a provisional, you knock it out, pure it right down the perfect shot, and then you go in the bush. Well, now you go find your first Pro V, and you now have to play that ball because you said provisional. If you find the original, you got to play it. Chances are, because it's troublesome, now you're going back to the tee to hit another shot. You have to abandon the provisional you hit because you found the original. Or the option would be, you hit that one in the bush, you go, I'm taking it unplayable. You hit your next one out in the fairway, it's perfect. And now you can go into the bush, look for your ball, because the ball that's out on the fairway is now the ball in play. So it's just a matter of knowing your ball. You cannot declare a ball lost. The rules state that you cannot declare a ball lost. So, but the simple thing is just saying, I'm taking it unplayable, hit another one from the tee, and you're good. That happened to Phil Mickelson. It was a U.S. Open. I have no idea what year it was, but I remember him doing it. He hit it down this gorge, and he says, don't look for the ball. He's hit a perfect provisional out. And of course, some fan or a marshal or somebody found it. Now we had to abandon the provisional and go back, and I don't remember all the details at that point, but the reality was all you had to do was say, I'm taking it unplayable. In a bunker, you still get your same 3 relief options, but there is a 4th option where you can take relief outside of a bunker. And we'll go to the diagram on the next slide, which is pretty explanatory here. So we get those same ones, the 1, the 2, and the 3 are your main options. The only thing is 2 and 3 have to be in the bunker. So you can see just above the number 3 how the base semicircle doesn't exist up there. That doesn't mean you can go outside the bunker there. The ball must be dropped within the bunker, or that's for a 1-stroke penalty. Or for an additional stroke penalty, you can go to number 4, which is back on the line of relief outside the bunker. So your option outside the bunker is always back on the line relief for the additional stroke penalty. Okay. If there's any questions, this is where we get to. So Rule 20 are any rules issues. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And what do you do if you don't know what to do? And it depends on the format of play, because you approach stroke play totally different than what you do match play. So let's start with match play, which is the next slide. If you want to go next one, which is the match plays. We know that you're only playing against one other person, or your group or your partners against another pairing. So you can decide issues by agreement. You can agree on how to proceed. If you decide wrong and you find out later under the rules you were wrong, your decision still stands, as long as you didn't agree to ignore a rule or a penalty that you knew applied. But if there's a referee assigned to the match, then the referee must rule on it. And then the players must follow the rule. Even if the players said, no, we came to this agreement, but the official's standing there and he goes, no, you must do this. Well, you have to live by what the referee says. If a referee is not available and the players don't agree, or they have some doubt as to what the proper procedure is, well, either one of them can request and say, we're going to need a ruling. And it can be done later when a referee is available. The key factor here is that you have to make the request, and they call it like you must make the request in time. And it all depends on when the player becomes aware of the facts. In this, you can go to the next slide if you want. I think there's 2 scenarios. So you learn of these facts before either player has started the final hole. The ruling request must be made before either player makes a stroke to begin another hole. So if there's an issue, let's say on the 4th hole, you got to make your request. You don't know what's going on. You're not sure the things are right here. And you have some doubt. Don't stew over it for the next 14 holes. If you have a doubt on the 4th hole, say, I'm going to need a ruling, and you do it before you tee off on the next hole. That is making a request in time. If it's during or after the completion of the final hole, you've got to make your request before the result is final. So this goes back to the Rule 3 that we talked about at the very beginning. It's about when the committee makes a determination when the result is final. So it's all about when you ask or when you make it. If you have doubt, indicate, I'm going to need a ruling here. If the request is not made in time, the ruling will not be given. If it's not made in time, the result of the hole will stand, even if it's not correct. If the request for a ruling is for an earlier hole, let's say it happened on 4, but you decide on 6, you're going to make the comment that I'm going to need a ruling. three factors have to be met, and that's somebody gave a wrong number of strokes or didn't advise about a penalty, or the request was based on facts that they weren't aware of at the time, or when they found out about the facts, they made the request immediately. In match play, there is no option to play a second ball. In stroke play, there is the option of playing two balls. It's the totally opposite of match play in that you can't decide a ruling by agreement. You can discuss rules. You can ask about rules. That's no problem. But if you're in doubt in stroke play, you need to get a ruling. If there's nobody available, if there's no official or a referee around at the time, then you play two balls. You indicate, I'm going to play two balls. You play one the way you think it should be played, one the way perhaps your opponent thinks it should be, not opponent, competitor should be playing it. And then once you're done, you come into the scoring tent, you're going to sit down and the scorers are going to ask you, does anybody need a ruling? Did anybody play two balls? And as soon as somebody says they play two balls, that score is going to get on the radio and usually call the lead official to the tent. And then they'll make a ruling at that point based on what happened. And even at that point, we may say, get in the cart, we'll drive out, show us what you did, and we might have to make a ruling at that point. So, any situation not covered by the rules should be decided by committee. We treat the situation as a way that will be reasonable and fair. I know the earlier slide said that there is no right to appeal, that the referee's decision is final. But I can't say this enough, that we want to get it right. And if I'm in doubt, there is absolutely no question that I'm going to Don or Rob and going like, hey, this just happened. What do you think? I'm not sure here, because I want to get it right. There's just no question. The most important thing we have to do is get the right ruling. Are we going to make mistakes? Absolutely we are. But we will, hopefully, we will discuss all situations before coming to a final decision. If we advise you wrong, our ruling stands and you won't be penalized. But there certainly are situations in which our decisions will be discussed and we'll sit down as a committee and they may be corrected. And Rule 20.2 allows us to do that. So we will always seek guidance from outside agencies if we can't come up with the answer, which might mean talking to Golf Canada. We have the glorious opportunity with Don on here because he's officiated at US Opens and stuff. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So some things are just too detailed. Equipment rules. That is a massive document. There's absolutely no way we could know everything in that book. So we might need time to research that kind of stuff. So the key factor is we are going to do our absolute best to get it correct. And that is the end of that. Look at that. I've got 1 minute to spare, even though I could never have done it in an hour. So are there any questions?
Don't be shy.
While people are thinking, appreciate you going through all that, Gord. I would just, Rule 19 is a really critical rule that doesn't get utilized as much as it probably should, from my experience in walking into situations on the golf course. It can get you out of trouble. I talked about it at the last rule session. I understand giving up distance is sometimes something we don't want to do. But when you get into the bush and you try and hack it out once, you lose the ability to go back to where you just hit that shot that got you in the bush, because going back to where your last shot started from is in the bush where you were already. So then it's a cumulative amount of shots to get your way out, or trying to take that line between you and the flag. So having a good understanding of Rule 19 is very very important in my opinion. And unfortunately, we can give you your options. We can't tell you what we feel our best option is to get you out of there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll echo that comment. I'll tell you, I played Royal Dornoch a couple of years, well, before that last option in a bunker, and I was in the worst bunker. And I wish I had that option for 2 strokes to take that ball out, because I would have for sure. And I agree with Rob. There are many times where guys sit there and just whack it in the bush and make a mess of a round of golf when they could have just taken a stroke penalty. Boy, you see that a lot. So
Yeah, you've golfed with me. You've seen that a lot. I should use the unplayable lie. It's great that we had so many attendees tonight, and keep your questions coming. If you have any questions that you think of afterwards, just feel free to reach out to us. When you're playing in a Golf Manitoba competition, the referees are there to assist the players. The rules of golf are not simple. And as golfers, you're all honorable people, and you want to get it right, just as we want to get the rulings right. So just call us over. We're friendly people, and we'll assist you. The other thing is, if any of you have an interest in actually becoming a referee, we do have a great mentorship program where you can come and do a ride along with one of us at an event and see what is involved in refereeing golf. We're always on the lookout for new referees. So if that is something that is of interest, would be happy to accommodate you. I see there's one other question. Does a provisional apply to a lost ball, unplayable ball, or both? Well, a provisional ball is put in play when you think your ball may be lost or out of bounds. So that is when you would put a provisional ball in play. And then if you find your original ball in play, you have to abandon the provisional. So hopefully that answers the question.
just one on that, a lost ball outside of a penalty area. So if you think your ball's lost in a penalty area, you do not have an option for a provisional. So I know that is exactly what Don's meaning, but if you think your ball's in the water, you do not hit a provisional.
Right.
All right. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Don, Rob, Gord, thanks again for your time tonight. Anybody has questions, feel free to reach out to us at the Golf Manitoba office. And for anybody that missed some of this presentation earlier today, we should have it on the Golf Manitoba YouTube page sometime by mid-morning tomorrow. So feel free to check that out and keep it in your back pocket as well throughout the year, because obviously all this stuff is very helpful to everybody. So thanks again for joining us, and have a great night. Take care.
Take care.
Right.
Good
Thanks.
night, everyone.
Time for a swim.
Thanks.